would like to talk to you guys today about is Generation C. But I'm hoping today I can give you kind of a perspective on how young people today are interacting with each other, with brands, and certainly in the context of the social media or the changing media environment. Generation C, the term actually has been around for quite a while, probably 3 or 4 years. It was originally kind of spoken about generation content, but now in the last couple of years, there are a lot of different dimensions to Generation C. But it is all about a generation that's very much born from social media. But one of the key things with Generation C is that it's not specifically an age cohort. C is far more of a mindset, and it's basically a bunch of people, digital natives, who have kind of grown up with social media and whose kind of interests, passion points, and basically self-expression are all pretty much brought to life across, I guess, the backdrop of social media. So it could be a 14-year-old kid, it could be a 28-year-old lawyer, but basically this audience really uses social media as a really key form of self-expression. Generation C, they can really be summed up as what we call the connected collective. So this audience, or this community, more than any other, really need to belong to a collective. For young people, it's a real primal need to belong to something. It's hardwired from birth. It's probably the most primal instinct any person in this room has, the need to belong to a tribe. And for young people especially, happiness has always been kind of a direct function of belonging and expressing yourself within the tribe. And obviously this need for kind of constant connectivity to people who share similar interests has very much been kind of turbocharged by Web 2.0. So these social connections that young people have just been absolutely galvanised in the past 3 or 4 years. And it's none more, I guess, prevalent than on the weekend. And the weekend is Gen C's real kind of pivotal social moment. And for them, it's kind of 48 hours to create a story or a platform to tell the rest of the week. So they try and cram in as much as they can in that 24-hour, that 48 hours, and for some university students it kind of starts on Thursday night, into that kind of 2 to 3 day period to really kind of set a platform for the week. And as we all know, it's about friending, updating, tagging, sharing, gifting, texting, MMSing. So all these things are all about conversation starters. Me wanting to start a conversation with my friends or my tribe. And that tribe may be a bunch of 7 or 8 people, but it also might be my broader community of 20 or 30 really tight friends. But social media and social networking particularly is the perfect platform for these young people to engage in that conversation. For, I guess, older audiences, we market it to the herd. And Gen X, it's very much the way we all engage as marketers, we market to the herd. So Gen X, they move very independently, they're typically waiting to be led, they're very passive in the way they interact with brands. Typically, not always, they're slower to uptake trends. But this has really changed with Generation C, and certainly through the onset of social media platforms, which have really enabled what we call kind of swarm behaviour. So just like a swarm of bees, they can mobilise in minutes. Gen C tribes, they move as one, they typically don't follow a leader, and they're very active and they're sharing constant intelligence. And I think that's a really key point for this audience is they're kind of buzzing off each other in terms of the actual intelligence they're sharing with each other. And really importantly, it's about speed. So today, I think one of the key factors for an idea is not necessarily the scale of how big it gets, but the speed in which it is diffused in popular culture and the speed in which it actually hits social networks. So today, when in terms of agencies, media agencies, creative agencies, thinking about insight, for me, it's far more about the social intelligence we can gain around the swarm as opposed to individual insight. And you really need to think about, what conversation you're creating for the swarm to kind of pick up and run with. So the tribe's constantly telling each other what they think about each other and what they think about brands. And they're having over 150 conversations a week about brands, and this is typically twice as much as older audiences. Gen C, everything is reviewed and rated on sites like Wiki, Delicious, and many others. And 82% of them, or young people, rely on peer approval for decision making. So this kind of massive peer influence, throughout the social web, has made decision making very much a team sport. So now more than ever, young people are making decisions as groups. So as marketers, we really need to talk to the we as opposed to the me, because young people are very much kind of swarming and mobilizing together towards the most interesting brands, the most interesting cultural objects. So it really kind of shifts the way we think about how our brands behave. The social web has obviously facilitated this idea of kind of constant conversations. And Gen Z thrive on this. Mike spoke about live streaming, and this audience in particular are constantly live streaming their lives to the world, whether or not be on Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, MMSing on Instant Messenger. The thing for me which is really interesting is that typically there's no hello or goodbye, right? It's a constant stream of dialogue. So recently I was hanging out with some 18, 19-year-olds just talking about technology and how they interact with it. And a lot of them were saying that they never ever finish a conversation using their mobile or their iPhone. It's so they're getting up at 3 a.m. to continue that dialogue. When their iPhone wakes them up in the morning to go to uni or to go to work, it's like a continuous dialogue. So this idea of conversations never ending is really important for brands, because if that's the mindset of how young people are interacting with each other, I think as brands we can learn a lot from the type of engagement we need to create with young people. And it brings this constant stream of info means teens and even younger kids and tweens are absorbing or creating over 9 hours of content of media a day. And within that 9 hours of media consumption, they're multitasking obviously across a whole lot of screens. They're multitasking across Nintendo DS, iPhones, Nokias, their laptops, whatever it may be. But within that 9 hours, they're actually taking 13 hours of content. They're pretty much living in a continual state of kind of partial attention, where there's dipping in and out of so many different streams of information. So for your brand to obviously gain their attention and engage them, it's a really challenging job given the amount of information they're taking in. One of the other things that this audience has really become, they've become cyborgs, and that we all know on and offline is very much one and the same. They've got very much a kind of symbiotic relationship with technology. They've grown up with it. And for me, one of the key things especially with mobile phones, is that it's really replacing their memories. It's making them far more efficient human beings in terms of the way they interact with each other. Hand up anyone in the room who could potentially recite the mobile phone numbers of their 3 best friends. 7 people or 10 people, probably amongst 200 people. It's a pretty clear indication. I think that's even more exacerbated with young people. They are absolutely relying upon their mobile phones to be their obviously their connection to the world, but also the fact that it is really, really critical in terms of the way they handle their memory and the information that they're consuming. The mobile phone for young people particularly is really their social oxygen. They can't live without it, and I think the more, when I'm talking to young people that in the telco space, this idea of social oxygen being so important for the way they live their lives. And I did a little deprivation study where I actually took a couple of guys and a couple of girls, and I took the mobile phone away for a weekend, and we basically kind of filmed them and spoke to them about it afterwards. And it was an amazing response to the role of the phone and the disconnection they had from their lives. Like it literally, they just actually got amazingly depressed from the fact that they were being completely disconnected from the real world. So it just gives you an idea of the power that obviously mobile phone technology, as well as the social media platforms that are sitting behind that, play for young people. I think one of the key tenets of Gen Z is this need to really live spontaneously, and the reality is they've got a really structured life. Their world's full of timetables, university timetables, commitments, part-time jobs. And one of the things that social media tools really gives them is this ability to be really spontaneous, and spontaneous in things that they are able to change the moment and try new different experiences. And that's what really, the fact that they can find out via a social networking site about what's going on. They can make an instant decision to jet off to something else. And I think that's one of the really powerful elements of what social media tools are providing in people. And I think it's important because social media is only interesting because of what happens in the outside world. The only, the most interesting stuff you read about is the things that are actually happening. I mean, apart from, iPad launches and that kind of stuff. Young people want to talk about what's happening in their outside world. Gen Z are controlling your brand like never before. Whether or not we like it or not as marketers, as clients, they very much see themselves as co-owners of your brand. They can do a drop in a second, they can pull you down just as quickly via Twitter, and it's diffused amazingly quickly within social networks. And the immediate nature of Web 2.0 means that brand relevance is very much determined in the moment, and it's all about brands creating energy and having momentum. So now young people more than ever really want to engage in kind of ongoing narratives with the brand. They don't want to just sit back and wait for a brand to talk down to them. They really want to get involved. and they want to be taken on a journey. So the brand story really needs to be able to morph and evolve based on what the community wants. Another key element of Gen Z is this idea of co-creation, and many of you have heard this word before, and it's certainly not a new thing, but I think it's really important because I think it's going to be even more prevalent. In that, the social web has very much brought out the creative side, and we've seen a definite democratization of creativity. Gen Z love co-creating on platforms. They see themselves as filmmakers, authors, DJs. So there's been a definite power shift in terms of the creativity behind social media. They love playing with ideas, remixing, mashing songs, and ads, trailers. I mean, if you go onto YouTube and you look at the Cadbury Gorilla ad, there's more views on the remixes than there are on the actual video. So it just gives you a sense that young people today are really want to be able to have ideas that are almost open source that they can go in and put their own spin on. And brands really need to think about, certainly social networking sites have brought out young people's competitive side. More young people spend time snooping around their other friends' MySpace or Facebook accounts than they do looking at their own. So this idea of snooping, looking at who's been with who, what parties I've been invited to, what festivals are on, who's going on holidays, all the gossip is really important for young people, and that's something that never changes. But what has changed is that young people really carefully craft their online identities. And the reality is that their online identity is very different from their real life identity. So if the digital version of their self is very much the wannabe version of myself, in that there is a disconnect. So the stuff you see posted on their MySpace or Facebook pages, or they're commentating on Twitter, is very much probably the 10% of their life, the most exciting part, and it's really interesting that young people are really kind of putting their lives up on show and wanting to create this kind of uber cool version of myself. And Gen Z is this very much chameleon-like behaviour, and Gen Z have very much splintered personas. They're constantly changing their personality, and they want to belong to many different tribes at once. So it's kind of this idea of kind of tribal blending, whereby they want to be kind of part DJ, part skater, part emo, part whatever it might be, and that at any one time they're dipping in and out of all these different subcultures, and for them that is a really part of their own self-expression. Whereas 5-10 years ago it was all about you being part of one particular subculture. Whether now it's far more important to dip in and out and belong to many of these different subcultures, because that gives you status within the tribe. That is what kind of puts you, pulls you apart from the others. And I spoke to some young people earlier this year, and one of the key things they said that they want to avoid is being seen as one-dimensional. For them, being seen as just into one thing is like an ultimate embarrassment. See, very much agents have changed. Anyone now with a smartphone or access to the internet has a voice, and certainly over the past few years, we've seen young people very much empowered to shift against different movements. And I mean, Obama and his whole positioning around change was very much, and the fact how the way he mobilised young people across America to become kind of his message carriers is a great example that young people today really, if they believe in something, if a brand really has conviction and stands for something, they're quite quick in the way they can engage with that brand and, I guess, spark a movement.